2, a 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is
the Monday Morning Quarterback from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The episode date, the 26th of August 2019. This is Boston Red from or in the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth. We always pay homage to Jerry on the Monday Morning Quarterback, where we quarterback now more so than just the Sunday talk shows, in general events that cross the desk, so to speak. And today we'll in sports we see Andrew Luck. He was the quarterback for the Minneapolis Colts, and he is retiring. He was drafted in 2012, and due to injuries he missed a whole season. He is I believe 30 years old, and he decided to hang up his football, so to speak. So Andrew Luck is out, and Joe Walsh is in. Let's get to Joe Walsh. He's a character used to have one of these crime shows. I forget what it was called. Anyway, is primarying Trump. He brought tons of very Trumpian baggage, according to them. As old Joe Walsh here has been updated. He is a former Congress type from Illinois that he will challenge Trump, DJ Trump, in the 2020 primary. It's difficult to state how questionable this idea is for everybody involved. The Times reported last week that Walsh was getting some high-profile encouragement from the leaders of the Never Trump movement. Billy Crystal, he has the Daily Standard. Anyway, nonetheless, Crystal has been a Never Trump Republican since Trump was elected in 2016 and is working hard over the past year to recruit someone to run against him. Crystal said Walsh is comfortable with the in-your-face format of conservative talk radio. He's a conservative talk host, be very interested, potentially more effective combatant against Trump than someone like William Well, the General Gentile, former governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, whose own primary challenge to the president has gained little traction. He has a different appeal than Bill Well, no doubt about that. Crystal said the fact that he was a Tea Party congressman who voted for Trump in 2016 gives him credibility to speak to Republican primary voters. Never Trumpers like we don't have. There's certain optimistic spin. Walsh does not, just doesn't have the experience with conservative talk show supporting Trump, inhabited the very few swamps of birtherism, Muslim rhetoric, and conspiracy theories as recent as a couple of years ago. The one-term Congress type also twittered the N-word on occasions and carried significant personal baggage into his primary with Trump. Just a man for the job, it seems. Hassan, who pulled out a number of examples of Walsh's tweets, they include the falsehood that former President Barack Obama was a Muslim, employed racist Trumps, and that he should go back to someplace other than the U.S. and make frequent use of racial slurs. Never let a voter feel his birth certificate, according to Joe Walsh. found out if I say redskin with so forth and so on, redneck Bible thumper, redneck Bible thumper, I could stay on, but if I say the N-word or whatever, they cut me off. Once again, blacks in America trying to burn their own neighborhoods down. Some examples of what he said. Trump is right. Polls show most Muslims believe in Sharia law. That's what Joe Walsh had to say. Anyway, in the neighborhood there's a matter of child support dispute, but his marriage failed in 2012 re-election campaign. His ex-wife accused him of being a deadbeat dad, owing her $117,000. They later reached an agreement. They usually always do. We are seeing that the argument most recent in form of Anthony Scaramucci, the former 11-day White House communications director, and publicly hounding and recently 180 on Trump, has earned him 10 days in the spotlight. The most transparent manifestation of this tendency might be Walsh, whose tweets will frequently go viral when he bashes Trump. Even a former Tea Party congressman is saying this. Perhaps nobody has gained more mileage out of winning a single term, but even back then Walsh was largely regarded as a fluke, someone who rode in a wave in 2010. His campaign was badly underfunded, disorganized, yet he emerged from a crowded primary field and found himself running exactly the right year. Illinois Democrats redrew the district because of the 2012 election. Walsh found himself without a winnable seat. Thus, it would have been tough for him to hold his own district had he remained as it was, since he parlayed that brief tenure and pension for provocation into his career as a radio host. In the New York Times op-ed this month, he expressed regret for some of the above sentiments, saying we are now where we can lead. People are certainly evolved, perhaps, Walsh. It's an idea that makes sense in theory, as does Crystal's strategic angle, but never Trump movement also needs to be wary of being used and attaching itself to people who would undermine its goals. Bill Walsh entered the race that includes Bill Ware, who supports abortion rights and was the 2016 vice president nominee of the Liberal Party. Could soon include former Congress type, South Carolina governor, who was ousted for criticizing DJ Trump. So this is a Washington Post article here. Let's see who wrote this thing. The fixed analysis here of Walsh. Aaron Burke. This is on the 25th of August. So 2011, he's been out of the game for a while there, but it'll make it into an interesting contest, we think. Anyway, we'll continue with the Washington Post's storyline here. Another one by Aaron, did I say Burke or Blake? Blake, sorry about that, not Burke. Anyway, wait a minute. Oops. Sorry about that, opened up the same article twice. The ICE chief called family detention summer camp. Here's what it looks like. This is by Mara Scachici. Hope I pronounced the name correctly there. Dilley, Texas, more than a year after he drew criticism for comparing family detention to a summer camp, the nation's top immigration enforcer stood in a clear hallway in America's largest family detention camp. Take a look. Albans, suppose across the hall was a dental office with sterile instruments. The cafeteria was serving hot dogs. Anyway, green salad, all you can eat. Kindergartners sat on colorful mats in a school trailer. Happy, a loud news photographer said, no doubt this is one of very few. Albans and other officials led the tour the same day that Trump officially moved to terminate a court agreement that set basic standards for care, including 20-day limit on detention. It's called the Flores Settlement Agreement. The administration said withdrew from it. That's been since 1997. Would mean families would be detained indefinitely. Officials said they hope to hold them no longer than 50 to 60 days, 2 months there. The Southwest Texas Family Residential Center sets off a vast stretch of scrubbable land in a tiny former oil boom town an hour south of San Antonio. There's a Dairy Queen, a hotel, a White House Inn, not much else. Dilley facility is one of 3 family detention centers in the U.S. with a total capacity of 3,000 beds. Abiance, I suppose is how he pronounced his name, said that unlike the Border Patrol facilities where children are lack toothbrushes and were photographed sleeping on the ground, the ICE Family Residential Center gives children and parents 3 hot meals a day, access to a wide variety of services, including a 24-hour infirmary, a daycare center, a library with internet and email access, even a beauty salon, a charter school, a cantina. Why not public school? Anyway, mothers and children are as young as babies, sleep in the dorms with bunk beds, share bathrooms, with trailers divided into neighborhoods with names as Green Turtle, Red Frog. Pediatricians, child psychologists, they're all there. I wonder if any of them speak Spanish. Who knows? Activists for the immigrants say detaining children with hundreds of strangers is dangerous. Chicken pox, the flu, and various other diseases run amok. A mother of a 19-year-old girl who fell ill at Dilley and died shortly after her release last year has filed a wrongful death suit. And UNICEF, the President Chief of UNICEF, the United Nations agency that advocates for women and children, this is Carly Stern. The proof is their detention children experience long-lasting harm on their well-being, safety, and development. Before the rule can take effect, officials must go before a U.S. District Judge, Dolly G., an Obama appointee in Los Angeles. Officials from Dilley, I guess, is not a secure facility, but women and children are free to wander around the campus. But if families try to leave, officials say they could be apprehended for being in the U.S. illegally. But in interviews Thursday in San Antonio bus station, hour north of Dilley, women recently released from the facility, heading to join friends and family in Miami, in Florida, Dallas, and other cities, said they were treated well. The food was tasty, they said, and they appreciate access to doctors and lawyers. We didn't suffer. We were locked up. That is somebody called Lillian, who spoke on condition of that a last name not be used. Very wise there. Dilley guards, not parents, has set the rules. Children cannot run barefooted. Mothers must not leave their children alone in any moment. There, everyone has to make their own bed, fold their own clothes. Office officials reward migrants with pizza for the cleanest rooms. Migrant family residential centers expanded under the Obama administration. Officials say expanding family detention under the Obama administration created deterrence that led to a market drop in apprehensions from 68,000 in 2014 to 40,000 the following year. But G ruled in 2015 that the government could not hold children with their parents longer than 20 days. So it's back there to Judge G. Thought we'd put that in. And let me look at my cheat sheet here. The newly elected chief of the Cherokee Nation, that's in Oklahoma, is petitioning Congress to have a representative. Also today in that very red state where Jerry Pippin presided on the airwaves, there is will be a decision on a lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson that will be outside of Oklahoma City in Norman, Oklahoma. And we'll see how that comes out there. And let's see, what else do we have here? AT&T is on workers, that is, are on strike in southwestern U.S., Florida and some other states there. Hasn't been announced in the wider media. So that's some of the things we are looking at and covering here. So let's move on. Where are we going next here? Let's just give the baseball scores, and then we'll go to Charlie Cook, and then we'll flip back to Bernie Sanders. He was on the campaign trail, as he's been on. Let's go to Bernie Sanders first, then we'll come back to the baseball score. Back to the Washington Post here, then we'll get Charlie Cook. A little out of a little disorder here, but again, and this is an opinion, what Sanders gets and others don't, about the climate change debate. Dowley, yes, Dowley. Anyway, I've written previously, the major Sunday talk shows are the best reflection of what topics our political and media establishments believe are worthy of attention. So this week we've airs the Amazon on Fire, a grand new climate plan from one top Democratic candidate, Bernie Sanders. The departure from the race of Jay Inslee, he's a governor of Washington, who had championed climate change as his signature issue. You'd hope these shows would devote a little time to this critical topic. No such luck. There was nothing more than a curiosity mentioned on 4 of the talk shows. I guess we recorded back when we wanted to or not. In some cases, the former, I guess he's the mayor of South Bend, on NBC's Meet the Press, the guests would try to bring up climate only for the host to settle on another topic. On the State of the Union, even had Sanders on as a guest, but didn't ask him about his new policy. Only one show this week, that's on ABC, discussed climate change for the grand duration of one question. Urgency of climate change is beyond dispute. The world is warming faster than we previously realized. On which we cut emissions in half by 2030. That's roughly a little over 10 years. More heat waves for tens of millions of people. Far greater species loss. Increase water scarcity in some of the world's most unsuitable regions. A tenfold increase in Arctic ice. Freeze summers, and a total wipeout of the world's coral reefs. Incidentally, the classic coral reef in Australia, I believe, nonetheless, there is a collection of large pumice moving in that direction, which will redefine the coral reef. Anyway, again, why the major talk shows, spend much time on climate when the Democratic Party, the most vigilant of the two on the issue, dumps discussion of it. Last week, Democratic National Committee voted twice against allowing a debate dedicated to climate change. The first vote block of an official party debate on a topic. Old Tom Perez and other opponents argue that doing so would unfairly privilege one issue over another, and perhaps he's right when it comes to further crowding an already full calendar. But it would require an effort on the DNC's part to allow unofficial debate on climate change. Perez, concerned about promoting specific topics, could be addressed by lifting sanctions for debates on important subjects. Candidates could decide individually which debates are worth their time. But even if Democrats and media establishment do start to give climate change more time. Those discussions could just stop at how much this will cost. Incidentally, at the G7 today, they are in fact deciding on climate change. The fires in the Amazon, they forced the dictator down there, Jairzinho Bolsonaro, to call out an army of 40,000 to fight the forest fires in the Amazon. Sorry, but as fellow panelists and Democrats for America's chief, Juanette Simpson, said, where we are now with the environment, that people need extreme aggressive action on it. Sanders' plan isn't perfect. For example, it proposes a phasing out of nuclear power that would hit urgent emission targets hitting it more difficult, given that nuclear provides more than half of the nation's low or no-cost carbon electricity. But by the sheer size of his vision, as the author Bill McKibben put it, shows what simply must be done to meet the challenge physics have laid out. Yes, reaching 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030 may be incredibly ambitious, but laying it out, we desperately need drastic emission cuts. Moreover, Sanders recognized more frequently amongst current candidates climate change threatens the poor and the minority communities the most, and we've said that for a very long time. With Greenpeace and some others, we've had arguments with them in the past about that. That was way over 20 years ago. It had been in the late 80s, I believe, early 90s. Expansion of public transportation are the best routes towards emission reduction we need. And as for spending concerns, the Sanders plan actually aims to pay for itself in 15 years. And regardless, when it comes to climate change, Democratic leaders shouldn't just gripe at the price tag. For decades now, liberals, and again, this is offering half measures on climate and other issues out of fear of political backlash. Now, these are liberals. Now, Bernie Sanders is a progressive or social democrat. Let's get that right. Too often, these compromises have never helped them politically nor fully solve the policy problem. Saving the planet won't be cheap or easy. Decked by past leaders means that we need radical remedies. Sanders got this. Many in power don't. Now, this is his opinion here. The Post editorialized against this position. So again, we have very strange positions at times. We'll go to Charlie Cook in a minute, but let's just do the baseball scores while we're here. We've omitted these, and nonetheless, this was on. Let's just make sure that what we have here, I'll look through the lineup. We will get to Charlie Cook. I know we have some Pew work here. Pluralities in the most emerging economies. Believe government should ensure equal internet access. We probably will put this on an open source report. So let's just wander through here and no. I don't know how we got the wrong base and how Friday night came up. Probably what happened here was, this is left over from the week that was, for some very, very strange reason. Anyway, we'll just have to omit that. Let's take a station break here. Get back with Mr. Cook. Charlie Cook, the premier handicapper here, writing report here, and I suppose also the National Journal, on the 23rd of August 2019. These are numbers that should worry Trump the most. Is the title of his article. For months, my view has been that Trump has roughly 35% of the electorate locked up. That's usually the Republicans usually have 35 to 40% locked up. They will be with him, hell or high water. Another 45% will be against him, no matter what That leaves 20% up for grab. Actually, it's less than 20% that are up for grabs. But if we say, okay, 45% here are against him, you need basically 6% or 7% more to win an election. We arrive at these numbers by looking at the results between two different poll questions. First, to look at the intensity numbers in those polls that asked the presidential job approval ratings, and my pointer is, and we'll zip back here. All right, back to the numbers here. Strong approvals. There's our pretty good approximation of base, which while strong disapprovals comprise the hardcore opposition. We look at the polls. Asked a re-election question for incumbent, whether the respondents would definitely vote to re-elect Trump, probably vote for him, probably vote against him, etc. Anyway, to the latest NBC Wall Street Journal poll was released on Sunday. Anyway, it was conducted August 10th through 14th. They asked registered voters if Donald Trump ran for re-election as a Republican candidate, would you definitely vote for him? Probably vote for the Democratic candidate there, and basically what happened there was Trump, with another 11% indicating they'd probably vote for him. 41% said they would definitely vote for the Democrat, while 11% said they would probably vote for the Democrat candidate there. Since March, the last time NBC did this, the definite pro-Trump numbers have increased by 2 points. Defiant voters for the Democrat. Other polls conducted this year, defiance as low as 28%, as high as 39%, while definitely opposed at 43 to 56. In terms of approval ratings, the NBC Wall Street Journal found Trump at 43%. I saw a poll today, I think the right-wing Harvard Harris poll had him at 45%, all adults, 29% strongly approve, 14% somewhat, and 55% disapprove, 44% strongly, and 9% somewhat. Fox News basically identical, 43% approval, 56% disapproval. At the time of this writing, NBC and Wall Street Journal had not released their hearts matching up Trump with better-known Democratic candidates. But the Fox poll, all four potential candidates who were measured ran at least 6 points, as well as 12 above him, and Trump received 39% of the vote when matched up against Kamala Harris. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, one of his lower at 38% with Joe Biden. These are now and then, but we look at this. Last year, Democrats won national congressional elections by 8.6 percentage points, with Democratic candidates on average running 6 points ahead of Hillary Clinton in 2016 performance in their respective districts. According to Real Clear Politics average, the national polls show Democrats ahead on a generic ballot by 8 points. I've seen as high as 10 and as low as 6. It's reasonable to conclude that the playing field remains tilted in the Democrats' favor. For those skeptical of polling, remember that the national polls weren't far off. 2016, the average for all major polls had Clinton up by 3 percentage points, so the final popular vote result was well within the margin of error. Based upon the level of interest in the upcoming election, the turnout is likely to be very high. In other words, that's what we call a turnout election. Perhaps the highest presidential year turnout in modern history. Well, maybe not. In 2016, the turnout was 60%. That's pretty large, roughly compatible to the last few election cycles. That meant 40% of the eligible voters did not vote, but last year's midterm was higher. 1914. When the cycle is very high, the electorate is very likely to resemble the universe of all registered voters. Indeed, last year's midterm was dead on, with the exception of the Florida governor's race, when they cheated and stole votes. That general election upsets in nationwide races are hard to come by. The national popular vote for the House was only 0.6% off. That was in the average. And we at this mic have been a little bit leery of sometimes the averages. We'll see. Nonetheless, this was in a national journal on the 20th of August, and of course lots can and will happen in the next 15 months. No doubt about that. We really wouldn't want to pigeonhole ourselves for 15 months. That is kind of out of the question. We'll do this Amy Klobuchar situation from our local newspaper here. The same job that served as the foundation of Klobuchar's political career has been a source of fresh skepticism among voters of color and progressives in the Democratic Party, who are weary of the former prosecutor seeking higher office. This is by Steve Anyway, Amy Klobuchar used a well-worn phrase midway through the snowy presidential campaign launch that was back in, vowing to do the job without fear of favor, the same way she had earlier as a prosecutor, using the same words in her 2015 autobiography, a chapter entitled Her Days as Hennepin County Attorney. She, since joining the Senate, Klobuchar shied from point to her experience leading an office that brought a high-profile case against an appellate judge, a baseball legend, while pioneering a new police lineup identification standards. I think there's a very strong argument could be made that someone with this experience, who has a record of getting things done in this year, is actually the best person to put in front of the ticket if you care about criminal justice reform, said in the interview. That was Klobuchar. But the same job has served a foundation of her political career as a source of fresh skepticism. Now, this has also happened to Kamala Harris, who is an African American, people of color and progressives in the party. She, of course, trails top-tier candidates, Kamala Harris, who is from California. Both have managed to weather criticism, but that is for top tier is a little different from not being a top tier. Though widely viewed as being a mainstream prosecutor in the 90s and 2000s, Klobuchar is basically into the Joe Biden effect here. She has done enough to address topics like police brutality, racial disparity in the prison systems. Time may be running out on her chance to lead that conversation. The challenge she now faces is that she has a window when she came out as Joe Fluff, I think is how I pronounce it, of Fordham's University's law professor, closely tracking criminal justice platforms of presidential candidates. Anyway, now a few months later, after people initially criticized her role, she didn't say anything. I think it's a little too late. Prosecutors under pressure, having only prosecuted 6 misdemeanor cases. She became the state's attorney in the largest county there in Minnesota, with a 38-page leadership plan, and ended each year with a series of publicly declared goals for the next year. A sense of having to prove herself when she were first, said Klobuchar, referring to being the first woman in that position. I mean, now they have a fellow that came back from his 30-day sobriety trip. Amongst the proudest moments, she said, was having resolved unsolved killings like 11-year-old Byron Phillips, who was caught in a crossfire in a gang dispute. Klobuchar also wrapped up the white-collar prosecution, one that led to prison services for a state appellate judge by the name of Roland Emerson, convicted of stealing from a trust he'd set up for a friend's disabled daughter. Klobuchar's office also helped devise a new set of county-wide policies for law enforcement and crime police to use double-blind photo lineups and show photos subsequently instead of at once. Former Vice President Mondale, a longtime mentor, said he thought Klobuchar was a great prosecutor there. Well, But prosecutors aren't in vogue this year, unfortunately, there. But he acknowledged prosecutors are under pressure now. She faced questions about declining to charge coppers involved in more than 24 fatal encounters with civilians during her tenure, something no Minnesota County attorney did until 2017. Klobuchar has since said she supported a shift away from grand juries to a shift to pro-police shootings in favor of a county attorney making charges themselves, which Klobuchar served as a county attorney. That was 1998 to 2006. Has since been examined as a contributor to a long-running racial disparities which is in the prison system around the country. The truth is that when we got there, people in the African American community, particularly North Minneapolis, were coming to us saying we are not getting justice for our children, Klobuchar said, and that doesn't mean there are no other problems, but it was very important to note that our job was to enforce the law. If we didn't pay attention to their cases, then we had a double standard. Klobuchar's campaign noted that the prison incarceration rate for African Americans in her county dropped when she was in office. Yet, according to data by the Bureau Institute of Justice, prison admissions for African Americans still were 22% higher than for Europeans in the county. When you say tough on crime, that was us going to prison. That's Spike Moss, a longtime civil rights activist. To some people in law enforcement, such questions were invincible for prosecutors. If you run for president, you have experience pulling the levers of government, you're going to have a record. That's from a one-time U.S. attorney, Todd Jones, who is a former Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Firearms Director, now working as a chief discipline officer for the National Football League. A cushy job there. He also successfully represented the late Minnesota Twin star Kirby Puckett in a sex assault case. Klobuchar's office brought in 2003. She got a record just like Kamala Harris has, Jones said, and to a certain degree I think it's a bit unfair because things were different then. And from Keith Ellison, a former Congress type who is the Attorney General of Minnesota now, who crossed paths with her as a defense attorney, later as a lawmaker, also defends her record. But what else could he say? He is backing, of course, Bernie Sanders. But he says he appreciated Klobuchar's focus on improving prudency rates and supporting the county's drug and mental health courts. I never got the sense that she was a belt notcher or something of that sort, he said. Race has been in the system last month during a forum in the Motor City, Detroit, the hometown of Sharita Tlaib. She drew jeers from the audience when she said it is for the justice system to decide whether to charge a New York police officer for chokehold. He was fired, a man under arrest for selling cigarettes illegally. After asking to finish her answer, Klobuchar said, I think in a broader sense we have to make a decision how we're going to deal with criminal justice system that has a very strong problem with racism. Mike Hassey, who unsuccessfully ran for the her position in that county last year on a reform platform, said Klobuchar's statements relate to her time as state's attorney fall short of acknowledging the specific harm that were created and her role in it. Well, that's a very interesting question there. Hassey urged against disqualifying candidates over their record as prosecutors or as lawmakers when past legislation is now seen a different light. We need to look forward to the president and judge. Well, anyway, much of her campaign, Klobuchar has pivoted more towards issues like immigration, climate change, health care, and the economy. Over 100 of the 100 policy priorities she outlined, a little more than a half dozen concern criminal justice. I can see that, including proposals to create a clemency advisory board. I don't think I should hide from what I did, she said. I am proud of what I did. We put a fantastic management team together and hired really good people. We hired more people of color. We had a good track record. Well, Mr. Stephen Montoya wrote this article here. I finally got his name pronounced correctly. Now let me just back up here 1 minute. And I think, maybe I don't think. I guess I don't. I'm still looking at the wrong ESPN screen, and I don't think we can rectify it at all. No, we aren't able to do that, unfortunately. Oh well. Nonetheless, this will end our report. We'll do the Pew Center on the internet later in the ball game. We'll have a look ahead at our schedule, our Labor Day program, which will be next Sunday, and next Monday we'll have the Monday morning quarterback with the scores as we look forward here. And we'll have some other programs during the week. We covered Bernie Sanders when he was at the Minnesota State Fair, and we kind of decide what we're going to do there. We're thinking of perhaps Labor Day having Bernie or Liz Warren and whomever else are the progressive candidates in a canned package. I don't know if we're going to do that or not. We shall see. Nonetheless, have a good week there. This is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Good day.